Hey folks, it's early afternoon here on Tuesday, August 4th, and I am about to make lunch for my daughters, and then I'm gonna go to the gym, and I'm gonna try to work out these scrawny little weak arms and flabby body. And then we're gonna go for a swim. But before that, I was just dabbling with an idea for a video that I wanted to do, sort of a preliminary, early version of a new sort of. Clearly, I like my categorizations and lexicon terms, and I think it's sort of like statistics in sports. They're just tools lenses to look through. They're not meant to be absolute categories. It's like whether we're talking about the tiers or what I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's almost like philosophical systems or ideologies or perspectives to entertain, but not to take as absolute, okay? I think you make the mistake of either seeing them as absolute and therefore you have to believe this way, you have to think categorically, or resisting that and saying all categories are BS. But I try to have a middle ground where you use categories, you use perspectives as lenses. They're just perspectives. They're not. Anyways, that's the caveat or disclaimer aside. This idea was somewhat inspired. I've dabbled with this before in the past, but it was somewhat inspired by some recent videos, or rather not the videos, but some of the comments that CTG, was the gentleman of leisure, was talking about how mid-range watches are crap, basically. Although he kind of backtracked and said not all of them are, but he was saying that they usually have bullshit history and movement, no technical innovations, and that sort of thing. And I just made a comment earlier today that I think Java Fusion replied to, that I felt that CTJ was kind of bypassing or missing that not everyone prioritizes movement and history over everything else. That there are different ways to sort of every watch collector has their own specific temperament, and I talked about that in a recent video. But part of that includes, well, what is important to you about the watch? Is it the history? Is it the brand name, the prestige, the status? Is it the look of it, the way it looks and feels? Is it the technical specifications of it? Some people really geek out on exactly how accurate the movement is. So I was just dabbling with, well, what are the major categories? How could we put the different aspects of watches into sort of a system? And so this is my first attempt at that, and I'll probably refine this until I'm satisfied with it, and then I'll probably just let it go or I'll use it. But I came up with 3 broad groups or categories, and each of these categories has subcategories. So eventually I'm going to want to not only refine the broad groups, but define, well, what are the subcategories and all that. So the 3 categories are: 1, aesthetics; 2, brand; and 3, technical. Now the names, that's just what I'm calling them for now. But that's what I'm going with, and we'll see. I might adjust that. So I'm going to go through these briefly and just talk about them. And then you feel free to comment in the field, comment below about what you think of them, whether you think they should be split up differently, whether there's something that doesn't fit into any of them, because that would be really key for me to, if I'm just missing something. I just thought of this like 10 minutes ago, so I might be missing something. And so forth. So aesthetics, I put in parentheses in my notes, art. This is the art domain. This is how the watch looks and feels. It includes design, build quality, finish, etc. It's the actual physical, tangible presentation of the watch. And some of the subcategories include style, build quality, finishing, brand, looks, etc. It's how does this watch look and feel on my wrist, in my hand? What is the actual aesthetic visible, sensory experience of the watch. The second category is brand, and in that I put culture. And this is the story and meaning of the watch. Brand might not be the right word. The story and meaning of the watch. This category has to do the brand itself and perhaps the model, what it entails both in terms of history and prestige. Subcategories include history, image, and prestige. Okay? So this is what, in a way, what the watch means, okay? A Rolex means something, right? And Invicta means something very different. So then the third category is the technical category, which I put in parentheses, science. So we have art, culture, and science. This is the technical specifications of the watch. It includes the movement and functionality of the watch, what the watch can do, how it functions, whether it has any complications, a chronograph, pushers, etc. To some degree, this category is what the watch does, but it is also how it does it and how well it does it. Subcategories include movement, complications, dive rating, luminosity, etc. All right. So these are three broad categories, and I'm not entirely comfortable with them. I think, for instance, the brand I almost want to split up, because I think oftentimes some people care a lot about the history and not at all about the image or prestige, while other people care only about the prestige and image and not at all about the history. In fact, there are some people that care only what the watch means in a prestige sense, and they don't care about the history, the looks, even the technical aspects, etc. This is often why I pick on some Rolex buyers, because you do have that category of Rolex person, and actually that category of Omega fan, who only want the Omega because Bond wears it in the more recent movies, right? Or the Rolex person who only wants to wear a Rolex because what it means in the corporate world. So I'm not comfortable with brand including those in one, because they're almost diametrically opposed. The same with technical. I think all the function, I almost want to split that into the movement and the functionality, because the functionality, it's like all the things that it can do, and it's very different than the movement. The movement's almost like the artistry of the engineering of the watch, whereas the functionality, you can have high function digital watches that are $90 that you buy at REI that can do much, much more than a $20,000 Patek Philippe. So I might split those up, just as I might split up aesthetics into, I guess, what you could call the design, or even just the aesthetics and then the build quality. I don't know. I'll think about it, or I'll just keep the subcategories. This is just a first initial attempt, and it's also to crowdsource ideas from my viewers. But the interesting thing is that I've noticed that people, I'm just looking at my notes, see if I missed anything. The interesting thing is that I think people tend to gravitate to one of the major categories or certain aspects of a watch more than others. For instance, for me, it's almost like primary, secondary, tertiary. For me, the aesthetics is primary. How the watch looks and feels. I get into the artistry of the design. That's a kind of artistry, right? The quality, the design, it's a, it's a palette of aesthetics, right? It's similar to developing your artistic palette, being able to recognize the difference between, something that's technically proficient but doesn't have a lot of artistry or originality or soul to it, or different levels of technical proficiency. So for me, the aesthetics is the most important quality. I'm a visual kind of guy. I like looking at things. I like the look and feel. My watches are chosen primarily for how they look and feel. The secondary aspect for me would be the technical part. I want a well-made movement. I want it to have I like chronographs, for instance. But I could see getting more and more into this, although the problem with the technical, the function's one thing, and some people get really into the function, some people love their G-Shocks, for instance, but the movement itself is perhaps, along with prestige, the aspect that inflates the price more than anything else. So these very sophisticated, complex movements, in-house movements that Vacheron Constantine or Patek Philippe make. That's just an area I can't go to. I can't spend $20,000 on a watch. I mean, even if I could, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would really could justify that. But I also understand there's something to the design work that goes into these complex movements. I mean, it's a cool thing. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, so some people really get into that. Some people find little aspects of that they're really into. Some people care about the accuracy, how accurate it is. I don't care. I want it to be pretty accurate, but I don't wear any of my watches for more than like a week in a row. So I'm going to be resetting them all the time. You know, that fine point accuracy seems to matter most when you're wearing one watch for weeks and months on end. But if you're resetting your watch every couple weeks, because I don't use winders, and I inherently, I'll put down a watch and it will sit there and it will stop after a couple days. And eventually I'll have to reset it. So then I reset it and I wear it for a few days. And unless it's like missing a minute or two a day, it's not really a problem. It's fine, you know. If I need accuracy, I can look at my cell phone. That fine accuracy. But some people really get into that, and I it's not for me, but I understand it's a valid part of this whole thing. So then the tertiary aspect is brand. Now this is where I find it's a little tricky, because on one hand, the status and prestige is something I just don't care about. It has no meaning for me. I don't wear watches to impress people. I don't wear watches to fit into a certain class of person, to represent a certain level of income. It's just something I'm not interested in. It's not part of my ideology in any way. On the other hand, the history is something that I find myself more and more interested in. And I could see getting more and more into that. It is interesting what each brand has a story, right? Each brand has a story, and they have had ups and downs. And it's actually interesting how some brands, CTJ was talking about Squale, bagging on Squale. And Squale has an interesting history. A lot of brands are like this, where they disappear, and then they're reformed. Sometimes they're reformed by the same family, or maybe somebody else buys it. I'm not sure. I think, was it Breguet? One of the other really prestigious brands, they went through something similar. Can't remember. So the history has some meaning to me. But overall, the brand, the cultural aspect is the least important. For me, the aesthetics, how the watch looks and feels, is primary, and then the technical aspects, the quality of it, is secondary, with the brand as tertiary. So again, this is a first attempt. This is an in process. You can get in on the ground of the new Johnny Casual model of watches that I'm playing with, and maybe eventually, I was thinking about. I don't really do many reviews because I've slowed down on my buying of watches, and I also find that I don't have patience to do what someone like TGV does so well, which is go into all the little subtle details and point them out, and it's really useful, and I really like how he does that. I think he's sort of setting the bar for watch reviews on YouTube. But yeah, but I've also thought about TGV uses a system where he has 10 categories, and he rates them all. And I did say at one point to him, I like his system. I think it's great, and it works well for him. But for me, the system doesn't quite work for how I view watches, because they're not weighted. The categories aren't weighted. And for me, certain categories are much more important. And I think the weighting has to be individualized. So if you have 100 points, for some people, design or aesthetics is going to have a larger share of that than, say, functionality or the movement or the brand or whatever. So it really depends upon the individual. And I think, but I actually might revisit TGV's categories because I think he covers the gamut, and then I'll make sure that my categories fit those all within them, and then I'll go from there. So let me know what you think. This is just kind of a fun watch nerdery video, and yeah, I will talk to you all later. Better make that lunch for my ravenous children. You know, it's sort of like statistics in sports. They're just tools lenses to look through. They're not meant to be absolute categories. It's like whether we're talking about the tiers or what I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's almost like philosophical systems or ideologies or perspectives to entertain, but not to take as absolute, okay? Whether, I think you make the mistake of either seeing them as absolute and therefore you have to believe this way, you have to think categorically, or resisting that and saying all categories are BS. But I try to have a middle ground where Hey folks, it's early afternoon here on Tuesday, August 4th, and I am about to make lunch for my daughters, and then I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to try to work out these scrawny little weak arms and flabby body. You use categories, you use perspectives as lenses. They're just perspectives. They're not, anyways, that's the caveat or disclaimer aside. This idea was somewhat inspired. I've dabbled with this before in the past, but it was somewhat inspired by some recent videos, or rather not the video. And then we're going to go for a swim. But before that, I was just dabbling with an idea for a video that I wanted to do sort of a preliminary early version of, a new sort of. Clearly, I like my categorizations and lexicon terms, and I think it's